Hey, I'm Peter.
And I'm Animesh.
Now, over the last 189 episodes, we haven't really covered much grindcore on the podcast. But you know what? We're changing that slightly and going all the way back to the origins of grindcore. The band and the release that we're going to talk about is considered by many to be responsible for creating the term grindcore, which is a reference to the British term for thrash. And the album we're talking about is Napalm Death Scum.
Scum.
Scum. Man, just saying that is fucking metal, I feel.
Yep, it's one of the most talked about, if not the most talked about grindcore album of all time. And I'm sure you already know a lot all about it, but here are some quick factoids nonetheless. Scum is the band's debut album featuring 28 tracks in 33 minutes and was released on 1st July 1987 by Earache Records. That makes it 35 years old today.
35.
Holy shit. Its A and B sides were recorded 9 months apart by two different lineups. Side A, which features 12 tracks, has Nick Bullen, future Godflesh frontman Justin Broderick on guitars and vocals, and drummer Mick Harris. And side B, which features 16 tracks, has vocalist Lee Dorian, guitarist Bill Steer, bassist Jim Whiteley, and Mick Harris once again on drums. So that means the only common link between both the two sides is a drummer. Wow, who would have thunk that in today's day and age?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it today, it would have been called like a split done between a band itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. You would have side A by Napalm and side B by Death.
Ghost AD. Oh, no, sorry, Ghost BC.
Ghost Bench.
All right. So, but all jokes aside, before we get into this episode, let's set some context and get at least some background from both Animesh and me on Napalm Death. So, straight up, Animesh, are you a Napalm Death fan?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Please tell me more, because no, I'm not. Seems like there's something behind this.
Okay, so it comes from a point of time when I started listening to extreme music and how I discovered grindcore, etc. And the band that got me hooked onto grindcore was Pig Destroyer. The first couple of albums that I fell in love with from this particular genre were Pig Destroyer albums, everything from Prowler in the Yard to Terrifier and even Natasha. After listening to that, going to Napalm Death, it just felt like Pig Destroyer was doing this much better, far more energetic, far more punkier too, in a way, far more aggressive also at times. Yeah, so which is why Napalm Death is one of the bands that I have a respect for because of their contribution to the music, but I don't actively go out and find the new Napalm Death album if there's one. I won't go back and revisit each and every album all the time, etc., etc. Maybe I'm not doing them justice, but damn, Pig Destroyer.
Yeah, I mean, see, listen, I'm going to put it out there. I'm a huge fan of Pig Destroyer, right? I mean, like J.R. Hayes' lyrics, just like reading through that, that's like something else. I think, like when you put it right, it's not fair, to be honest, to compare bands. Let me say that. But yeah, Pig Destroyer, man. I mean, I think around the same time we would have probably discovered Pig Destroyer. But coming back to Napalm, that I have to put this out there, dude. I'm a fanboy. I mean, let's be honest. Part of the reason why we're doing this episode is me just going gushing
Absolutely.
over. Oh my god, 35 years of Scum, and I've managed to watch them at Brutal Assault Live in 2010. They do a great cover of Nazi Punk's "Fuck Off" and like 10,000 people screaming that all together. There's no better feeling than that, I think. I did an email interview. I don't know if email interviews count anymore, but this was back in the day when Indian Rock MP3 was still active. They were on Century Media Records, so managed to get that. Not really sure who answered the interview, but let's just say the responses were as short as the songs on the B side of Scum. But honestly, the real fanboy moment for me was meeting Bill Steer when he played with Carcass here in Bombay. And It's still one of those moments I can't believe that happened. It's kind of like surreal for me. I mean, first of all, you watch Carcass perform live, and then you meet Bill Steer, and then you realize that Bill Steer played on this album, and the guy is, I don't know, nothing short of like someone who's basically had an impact on so many different bands and genres in itself, right?
Yep.
So,
I mean, for
yeah,
what it's worth, even though I'm not a fan as such of Napalm Death, I'd love to meet Barney and just talk with him,
let's say, put this out there and whatever,
manifest it.
manifest it. Oh my God, I can't believe we're saying this. But yeah, the next Napalm Death release, we should definitely get Barney to talk. I mean, and
Yeah.
what's funny is when I was thinking about this episode, I was like, shit, we can't reach out to any member because no one's in Napalm Death anymore, right? I mean, like Mick Harris, wow, he'd probably chew our ears off kind
Yeah.
of talking. But let's go back just to kind of understand your interaction with at least Scum, to be specific. When do you remember listening to Scum? I mean, I know you said you heard
Hmm.
Big Destroyer, so I'm assuming it was much after that.
Okay. Before getting into Scum, I have a lovely story about how I got introduced to Napalm Death. Oddly enough, it involves an Indian band, and coincidentally, it's around 20 years back in around the year 2007.
15.
Any guesses?
I
Oh,
know.
sorry. Any guesses?
Yes,
Do you want to
it has to do with the sign of the devil, maybe.
a sign of the devil?
Pentagram.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Yeah, it has to do with Pentagram, and it has to do with Pentagram when they were playing almost each and every big college gig there was to
Yeah.
support It's Okay, It's All Good. And I think this one was what's that college in Juhu, Bombay?
NMI Mets.
Probably. Whatever. It was a big college fest, and Vishal Dadlani's like in the middle of the set after playing like Fear and whatnot starts going, "Hey, you fuckers, you want to know?" I don't remember if he said the word fuckers. Probably he did,
Yeah.
but I remember him riling up the crowd, going like, "Yo, you guys don't like our music. You guys want to listen to some metal. We're gonna play some metal for you. How many of you here like Napalm Death?" And the Indian metal crowd in those days just went wild. Like, holy shit, they're going to play Napalm Death. Pentagram is going to play Napalm Death. and and lo and behold, they played Napalm Death. And immediately after the song started playing, Pentagram song, this transition was seamless and nobody realized it. And he trolled the fuck out of everyone because naturally the song he played was, or the band played was, You
You
Suffer But
suffer.
Why. Right? And I didn't get it. Anuj underscore Gupta, the famous Anuj underscore Gupta, obviously he knew, right? So he went around telling everybody, "Oh, did you guys like the Napalm Death cover and stuff?" And we ended up chatting and he told me about the song. And I was like, there's no way the song like that exists. There's absolutely no way. So I remember going home and immediately like trying to log on to the net, dialing it up, etc., etc. After all the handshakes and stuff, lo and behold, a song like that did exist, and it's just 1.316 seconds long. And holy shit, it belongs on this album called Scum. And damn, this album is supposed to be legendary. So I'm glad and happy that it's only 33 minutes long because that means it had relatively shorter file size, smaller file size, which means it like took only half the night to download it.
Oh my God. I think everyone who's post 30 listening to this episode can totally relate.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's when I first heard Scum, and that was my introduction to Napalm Death. What about you?
I'd probably heard quite a bit of grindcore, and I think like even death metal, and then you're gonna laugh, but there was a black metal phase I went into.
I'll never laugh about a black metal face, man.
But like it's not the black metal that you played with Solar Deity. It was more like the symphonic gothic type.
So you
Like
weren't listening to black metal. You were listening to emo.
See, there you go. I knew this was coming. I was going to be judged. But yeah, and at this time, I think I've mentioned the story in the past, but basically, a friend was getting out of metal. So I had like these huge spindles of CDs that I was given. And one of the cool things about that is like when you have those CDs, you just want to like go through and see like when there's no artwork, you're like, okay, what's the name that will really stick out? And then it was Napalm Death Scum. And I think because it was 33 minutes, there were like multiple albums. I'm like, oh, cool. So I get to listen on one CD more than one album. So I was like listening to it. And then, like, when I first heard it, because these CDs were kind of well worn, if I may put it that way, I was like, something's wrong with this CD, right? I need to check it. And I was like, okay, this is the actual album. Then I went like to the next album. Like, okay, so the CD is fine. Honestly, probably it's like the time I listened to it or the kind of person I was. I honestly didn't get it, man. I just didn't get.
I'll be surprised if there's anybody who first discovers Scum and listens to it without any context, actually even liking what they're hearing.
Yeah, and
it's not an easy album to get through.
Yeah, and especially like if this is your introduction to Napalm Death, then you're like, I don't want to check out the rest of their music.
Or if this is your introduction to grindcore.
Yeah. And I think this is a good point to actually say. Quick thing, and I want to get your understanding because you also play in a punk band. Would you consider Scum a punk album or a grindcore album?
It has punk roots, but what grindcore doesn't have punk roots? You can definitely see the evolution or the influence of punk in the music itself because of the use of D beats, because of the use of the staccato kind of riffing, because of the lyrical nature of the album itself. So would this album have come about if there was no punk? No,
of course.
But it's not a punk rock album. It displays its punk roots unabashedly, but it's taken that sonic structure of what is traditional punk or what is even traditional hardcore music or hardcore punk, really turned it up all the way to not just 11 to 22 or something.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm glad at least you're saying it because you have like a far more eloquent way of describing it, right? Because for me, I was just like, this sounds punk, but wait, there's something wrong, right? And that's why I was saying, like, because for those of you who remember, when you burnt CDs, sometimes it burnt at really faster speeds, and then this actual tracks were a little warped in a way. I don't know. It sometimes happened to me with my CDs. So that was one of the things I was saying. But also, just to kind of understand the context of the album, right? I mean, while before we dive into the music, one of the things, and this I've kind of dived extensively into, is the fact that this album really became popular thanks to one person. And his name is John Peel. So he was the radio host on BBC Radio 1. You know, basically the story goes that he came across this CD released by Yurik, had a good laugh about it, and kept like playing in the middle of his show like 3-4 songs off the album. I think You Suffer would have definitely been one of them. And just kind of couldn't believe that this was, you know, even like an actual band, an actual music. But later on, he actually invited to do what are now the legendary Peel sessions. So the band recorded 12 tracks, and get this, the total playing time of 5 minutes and 40 seconds.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would probably have taken them longer to like, you know, hit record or do whatever than some of the songs. And it's very well documented also by the band in books like Choosing Death and all of that, is that nobody actually got it. Like they didn't understand that, you know, in those 5 minutes they played 12 songs. Like they thought they were just like tuning the instruments kind of thing.
Exactly. I mean, I think that is the beauty of Scum, where it forces people to just appreciate the fact that music can also be done in this fashion. And it forces you to appreciate it because of just how pummeling it is.
Yeah. You know, the first Peel session, because they did multiple Peel sessions after that, was broadcast on the 22nd of September 1987. And well, the rest is history, because I think from what I've read, a week later after it aired, 10,000 copies of the album were sold. So
There
if
you go.
that, like, just, and the reason why the story is important, if that did happen 35 odd years later, two guys sitting in Bombay, India would not be doing an episode about it. Like, just to put that into context.
Yeah.
But we're done with the backstory. We've talked about our stories. We've talked about the importance of John Peel, which I think, we could do a separate episode just on him, really.
Uh-huh.
But let's dive into the music. Unlike our regular celebration episodes, we can't really go through each and every track, because I think we'll end up talking, and we probably have already talked more than side A or side B of the album.
Probably.
So let's take it side by side. So I think that's the more logical way to break it up.
Yeah, that's an easier way to do it too, because honestly, what can you say about some of the songs?
It's very distinct sonically, side A and side B.
Yeah.
If you think about it and actually give it a more deeper listen. So
exactly. That being the underlying point, you have to actually give it a deeper listen to even get the sonical differences. But there are definitely.
Starting with side A, which starts with multinational corporations.
I love this song. I mean, honestly, I really sometimes I genuinely feel that if Napalm Death had continued producing songs only like multinational corporations, they would have become a far, far, far bigger deal than what they are. Because this is punk rock taken to an elite art kind of a level in my interpretation of it. It's such a simple lyric, right? Multinational corporations, genocide of the starving nation. Beautiful, beautiful lyrical rhythm. And you take that lyrical rhythm and you embed it over a bunch of noise. So when the Riot Peddlers went to Singapore and Thailand way back in 2019, I think.
Wow, it seems like really long ago.
I know, right? Yeah, but it is. In our gig in Malaysia, our second gig in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, there was this one project which was a single guy. You have them cars which you have to keep running on the ground, and then you let loose, and then the car moves on its own.
Yeah.
And they produce an electrical, almost like a chainsaw-esque guitarish kind of a tone. You had one of the performers there was basically doing that. Okay. And that was the music. And on top of the music, he was doing poetry. And hearing that, my first thought was, holy shit, maybe he'll end up doing a cover of multinational corporations. Because clearly he wouldn't have done that if something like a multinational corporations hadn't existed in the first place, which basically gave such a huge leeway to so many other musicians and has influenced so many other musicians to even think of doing something like this. And these kind of tracks have become another signature or characteristic of grindcore itself, right? Where you have pauses between tracks with just sample driven songs as such. I love the fact that the album starts off with this kind of a song. I'm really not sure if the song that follows it, which is Instinct of Survival, it should be considered a separate song, because lyrically the themes fit. Musically, they segue into one another, so it kind of fits. I don't know if it's just cutting songs for the want of doing shorter songs.
It's like this song. I mean, let me put this up front, right? Songs should not exceed 1 minute or 2 minutes. If it's longer than that, it's not on the album. It's that.
Yeah. I genuinely, that's one of the things that bugs me about Scum. But oh well, if it wasn't done like that, we wouldn't have Scum the way it was. Yeah. So Multinational Corporations is a song that really stands out for me on this particular side. And the other song that really stands out for me is Sacrifice, because I love I love the lyrics of it. I like it's one of the best songs to put on if you want to think about or just vent out all your anger if like a close friend does something that you don't want them to do, or if somebody stabs you in the back, or if gulp, you have teenage love problems. Because look at the lyrics, man. The thoughts I had are now denied, and one day soon I hope you die.
Okay, so let's also put it into context that I don't think most of the band members were older than teenagers at that time, which
True, that's also true.
which
Yeah.
actually makes me think, right? Because like for me, one of the standout tracks for me is Polluted Minds. I mean, it's like
Mm-hmm.
a clear anti-establishment track. And when I'm trying to put myself as a teenager, I still don't consider myself someone who can write. But like when you write stuff like they don't give a shit long as profits are high, they don't give a shit if people die. I mean, like it's just like very grim stuff, right? And like that's where it makes me think of just like the context. And I think that's where I didn't understand or didn't kind of relate. I mean, maybe it's also the way I listen to the album. I mean, like now looking through a lyric sheet and going through it, you're just like, wow, this is like fucking dark. And sometimes when you think about it, like 35 years later, tracks like Multinational Corporations, Polluted
They
Minds,
fit so
still,
much more better now than
yeah,
at that time. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that's the relevance of the album, right? Which is
yeah,
why it remains one of the most politically charged as well as activist albums that you can always go back and listen to.
yeah.
It'll remain relevant till the end of humanity.
I mean,
Yeah.
another one that stands out, and this is one of the few really short tracks
Hmm.
on side A, right? Is The Kill. I mean, it's
Yeah.
22 seconds straight for the throat. It's like literally these guys were like, I don't know how many riffs are actually in the track. A few in there. I mean, you from what you can hear, I would put that also. But what's cool is like when you listen to a track like Siege of Power, right, which is
Hmm.
reminds you in terms of it kind of created it's a template for modern day or present day Napalm Death also, right? Just in the
Yep.
way the entire song goes. And that's very interesting, just considering that like when I look at the musicians that played on side A no longer play grindcore music, right? They all play like very different music in
Yeah.
there, so
Like
it's very
Broderick's
interesting.
solos probably
Yeah.
last longer than most of the songs. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy just to kind of see that. But of course, side A ends on the classic "You Suffer," which I cannot get over that pentagram story. Like that is maybe we should get pentagram to talk about it also. Maybe.
See, it's that song. Sure, it has a Guinness record to its name, etc., right? For being the world's shortest song or something of that sort. But it's such a perfect song, right? Like
Yeah.
lyrically, it's so profound. Like when you really think about it, just those four words can become a topic for a group discussion, right? Like it can become a topic to just mull about no matter what age you're at. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, some metalhead English professor has write an essay about question for the exam paper or whatever, saying, write a essay on the prompt, you suffer, but why? You suffer, but why?
But I have to ask you this and be honest. Have you been tempted to cover it with any of your bands?
Like ever since being trolled by Pentagram, I've wanted to troll other people. And I kid you not, I was for the longest time I've been trying to get the Riot Peddlers to do this exactly, because this is a sidebar and this is going to go into a rant. Punk rock doesn't get appreciated in India as such, and that reflects in how we are programmed into gigs. We are not heavy enough to be programmed as a metal band. We are not light enough to be programmed as an alternate or whatever independent,
Rock.
yeah, rock
Indie
act,
rock
indie
act.
rock act. We are too crass for them, and we are too smooth for metal. So I've always wanted to just rile up a crowd, and especially in like Bangalore and stuff, and go like, "Holy shit, you want to listen to some Napalm Death?" And obviously, half the crowd will automatically get what we're trying to do, but
Yeah.
just do "You Suffer But Why" and get into one of our own songs, and then have people come come about and tell us, "Hey, I really like the Napalm Death cover. Which song was that?"
Yeah, I mean, like, it's so funny how, and I'm pretty sure this happened like earlier, not so much now, where Indian bands like played their own songs, OCs as they call them, but right after a cover, and people switched and thought that was the cover. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We've done this in the jam room countless times. I mean, one of our most fun things to do in a jam room was genuinely writing grindcore songs on the spot.
I've heard, you told me about this, but you all never invited me for jams when this happened.
Oh, well, some things deserve to stay in the jam room. By the way, are you a fan of Silicon Valley, the show?
Of course, that was a legend moment, man. That was so fucking awesome. And the fact that, again, like, I loved it because of the content of the show,
Yeah, and the
not like because,
context, exactly, and
and
how it's
not,
used. Yeah.
yeah, and not because of the comedians and all. Like, it's only later I found out that, oh god, these guys are big comedians and they do
Mhm.
stand up and all of that, right? And the context in which it's used, and especially the character who does it, is like by far the most meta character on the thing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Basically, Guilfoyle, who is a Satanist on the
yeah,
show, right? I mean, the character is a Satanist, etc. He's also, because they're all excellent coders and excellent at their jobs, he sets up a crypto
yeah,
alarm system where basically he uses "You Suffer But Why" as the notification sound whenever crypto plummets, right, to below a certain level. And it happens so many times in the same episode, and it's hilarious because the while for everybody else who's listening to it is just like a harsh noise, and they're thinking he's doing it just to fuck around with them sonically. But when you actually think about it, you're investing in something like crypto, and then when it's plummeting, and what better way to capture that plummet than saying "You suffer but why"?
all the crypto bros that are listening to this episode, we're sorry, but
We
we
are not
can't,
sorry.
we
Maybe.
can't, no, for laughing at your state right
Oh yeah, of
now.
course. You suffer but why?
See, and that's just a last thing about that show, right? Is that a lot of things that the show portrayed, while it was in a comedic fashion, it's all true, man.
Yeah,
It's all
absolutely. See, that's the thing about sarcasm, right? When you
true.
actually get it, it hurts. And for others, it's just funny.
But okay, all the way from the stories of You Suffer But Why to side B.
Side B. Oh my God. This is the longer part.
Okay, let me ask you this question: Nick Bullion's vocals or Lee Dorian's vocals?
I don't know if you want to call me sane or insane here, but I really don't care.
I thought you're not going to say like it doesn't matter
You
to
really
me.
can't pick. Yeah. It that's essentially what I'm saying. I really, to me, both sides have their characteristics. And obviously, side B is a bit more not groovier. I don't know if that's the way to put it, but it's much more riff driven. There's more elements of them trying to write songs in a
Yeah,
proper structure. So, which is why even the vocal lines, etc., are thought out a bit more. It's definitely more polished, but in terms of the vocal quality on Scum only, there really isn't a huge difference between the two vocal styles for me. In terms of the lyrics, though, I definitely prefer side A over side B. Side A just has that rawness to it, with
yeah.
side B, yeah, doesn't. Side B is a bit more polished in that sense.
No, and it's interesting, right? I mean, considering that Lee Dorian went to form
Mhm.
Cathedral and then
Exactly.
Rise Above Records and all of that, it's just like he was on Scum. What? Like it's one of those things, also, right? Because I
Yeah.
think I'd also heard Cathedral by the time I went back to Scum, and I definitely had heard Godflesh and Yesu.
Mhm.
So, what's the standout tracks for you?
The standout track, definitely one of them is Divine Death, only because when you hear the entire album for the first couple of times, etc., Divine Death itself you'll remember, and that's purely because of the last line, which is Divine Death. It gets repeated so many times, and you feel like, okay, chalo, this is going to be the end of the album, but it's not. Like, it sounds like a perfect album closer to me. So I really enjoy Divine Death as such, because as a song idea it works. I really also enjoy Parasites for just for the amount of buffoonery that's, and don't get me wrong, I'm not using the word buffoonery in a negative context here, but just for the sheer amount of madness that's displayed on that song. I mean,
Okay, so since your ears are slightly better trained than mine, or far more, let me not say slightly, it's far more better trained. Is that a saxophone
I
on
really don't
Parasite?
know.
Because it kind of sounds like it. And what I like about Scum, and it kind of tells you, right, sonically, how so many bands try to replicate those ideas. I mean, like,
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
forget like all the bands in the last 30 years. Less than a month ago, Wormrot released their
Hmm.
album Hiss, and they've got saxophone on it, right? And I
Yep.
wonder, like, I was like, you know what? There's a larger discussion to be had about the
About
Wormrot album.
saxophone and metal.
No, about Wormrot's album, because there's what I've realized is they've got like a lot of these Easter eggs around it.
Yeah.
But more on that in another episode. For me, honestly, like I like Success. I mean, just
Hmm.
look at that last verse, right? Because and when I'm looking at it, the what distinguishes the lyrics, and I think maybe I've gone too much into it, that's why I can kind of see it, is side A is more like anti-establishment,
Hmm.
talking about just the world. Side B I see is more like introspective of sorts also, because like when you look at the lyrics for Success, right, it's like, where's your success gained from? What of your lives you are shat upon? Caught in a web, you'll play the game, an artificial life, but who's to
Who's
blame?
to
I mean,
blame? Yeah.
and when you think about it, like again, going back to the point I said, that it's written by a teenager, right? Like I'd love to know, like, just them looking back at these lyrics and realizing, holy fuck, like what were we trying to do, or what were we trying to say? But what's
Yeah.
funny, I noticed, and at least it was on Amazon Prime Music or Amazon Music that I was listening to, the track CS was marked explicit.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, I was like, when I was reading the lyrics, I'm like, what's so explicit about it, right? And coming back to also what you said, just in terms of song structures, right? And like how
Hmm.
this is kind of song, as the machine rolls on, right? Like you had that break in
Yep.
between, which I think is the base. So that, like, you can actually see now there's some sort of structure to this.
Yeah. Now
And
there's like almost a method to the madness on
yeah,
side B. On side A, it's just what the fuck is happening.
yeah, and I think that's where for me you can kind of tell, right? Like if you manage to listen to the album at one shot, you're just like, okay, who's this band in a
Of
kind of way,
course. Yeah.
right? that
Absolutely.
that's definitely in there. Okay, we've talked quite a bit. Let's get into, where does this album stack up in the Napalm Death discography? what
Hmm.
what's your thoughts, Animesh?
I'll put it in a very analytical way. It's the debut album, and it does an excellent job of introducing the world to the manic marvel that is Napalm Death. I mean, if you think about the words Napalm Death, that's exactly what an album by a band called Napalm Death should sound like. So heavy, so weird that it's being blasted by Napalm, right? Awesome. Like, it's not a well produced recording. It's great for at that time and the kind of sound they were going for. But today, in this age, with this much context, etc., I mean, you'll have to be shitting yourself if you say that you're a fan of Farty bass. That's, yeah. Um, is it the album that I revisit the most? No. Is it the album that I end up asking people to listen to, especially if I want to either introduce them to grindcore, or B, just get them to react to music? Definitely, I've done that a lot of times, and I will continue doing that. Also, there's the sheer hilarity of watching people or subjecting people to listen to you suffer.
Oh, 100%. I think that's what the album really, I feel, right? I mean, like, while John Peel had the idea and did it on like public radio, everyone's kind of done it at some point in there,
Of
just to
course,
kind of get reactions.
out of all the times I've got people to listen to the entire album, nobody's lasted the entire 33 minutes. Usually, by the end of like 5 minutes, they've tapped out and they go like, yeah, I can't listen to this anymore.
That's how I started off by saying, right? I mean,
Yeah,
and for me, that's the thing about comparing the album to the discography, right? I mean, when I was thinking about it, is it really fair to do it? Because, like, even side A, side B sounds differ.
hmm,
In today's context, 35 years later, this would sound like a demo, right? I mean,
it
uh,
is. Yeah, it's just a spruced up demo, even
yeah, yeah. And
even
if
when it
you
was recorded and released.
and if you're somebody who's like really want to understand the origins of grindcore, even understand like the evolution of extreme metal, right? Because a lot of these elements, I mean, think about it, making a kind of statement, but what would Pig Destroyer be if it wasn't
Of
for
course,
an album like
of
Napalm Death,
course. Yep.
Scum, right? So it that kind of in there. But coming back to Napalm Death, I mean, like, again, this is me being biased because these were the albums that I kind of heard and I really enjoyed by them. For someone who's like not heard Napalm Death at all before their mid 2000 release, I mean, they had like this great stint where they had The Code is Red, Long Live the Code, Smear Campaign, which is the fucking excellent album. I don't know how much time I've dedicated listening to that album. They did another couple. I mean, and the beauty is like they just released an EP earlier this year. So they're just not stopping. I mean, like so many years later, while the band lineup has been stable for some time, but yeah, they're just like fucking consistently there. What would you say would be the legacy of the album? I mean, just to kind of wrap up our conversation.
Okay, so definitely Scum will always be remembered for breaking new ground when it was first released, because here was music that was punkier than punk rock. It's razor sharp. It has a supremely precise chops and lyrics. And for what it's worth, it's became extremely popular, even if it was just to get people to react to pushing the boundaries, right? It basically sets new limits for what can be considered extreme music. And that by itself is the biggest contribution that it has given to the world of extreme music and metal.
I mean, going back to what we said, right, when we were talking about the kill, 22-second song. Like
Exactly.
it kind of like redefined what you would call music or sound. Because, like, what we've been very nice in not saying it, to a lot of people, it's noise, man. It's nothing else, right?
Yeah.
Just looking at some of the facts, right, which I found, like 2005, Scum was voted the 50th best British album of all time by Kerrang readers. In 2009, it was ranked number 5 in the Terrorizer list of essential European grindcore albums. And I think like the legacy is more the fact that, hey, if this wasn't there, then you wouldn't have like all of it. And I think probably like it would be there, but I think it still like helped just be some sort of reference in there because
It's, I would say, like how Jurassic Park, like the original Jurassic Park, basically became the visual template for dinosaurs,
hmm,
just like how Harry Potter became the visual template for wizards and magic in a way. Scum is the sonic reference for anybody who's getting into grindcore,
yeah,
and
I think
that's its legacy.
yeah, because I think anyone who is into like extreme music, grindcore, will definitely not say anything. I mean, like if you look at just like the titles for the songs, there are multiple bands. I mean, there's an Australian band called The Kill, and closer home, there was a Pakistani band named Multinational Corporations. So you can tell, right? Like over the period of time, just the kind of legacy it's had and continues to have, right? Because
Yep.
I've heard now, and that's what I found on streaming. There's a full dynamic range version of that. I mean, like, can you imagine listening to that? New way of trolling people. But what I definitely recommend to everyone listening and still listening to this episode is that check out the Scum story on YouTube. I think if you're like a music nerd like us, probably if you're listening to this episode still, you'll really enjoy it because it kind of tells you how these guys didn't even realize what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like Mick Harris, fuck. Like I love the way how just like no filter. That's all I'm going to say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's no filter. He's just like going at it in there. And I think it was also shot at a time where like Napalm Death had kind of reached some sort of status. So they had this kind of, chip on their shoulder. So that also kind of comes across.
And by the way, the documentary is longer than the album.
Of course. Just like this episode. But for me, actually, what also kind of sealed Napalm Death's legacy is the fact that they followed up Scum with enslavement to obliteration the next year, and that is a fucking. I mean, I know, like in the 90s they went like all death metal, but like back to back, if you've got those albums, man, that's like basically the sonic template for everything in grindcore. That's all from us. Tell us, I mean, are you a Napalm Death fan? What does Scum mean to you? I mean,
and yes, if you'd like an incentive to replay this episode, just count the number of times you heard "You Suffer" in this episode and let us know. You could win a cool surprise. Yes, you know how to find us. You write into us at hornsuppod.com or on Twitter at hornsupppod. I'm on Twitter at Hasmoani.
I'm a Trend Crusher.
This was Horns Up.
Horns up, guys.